Good morning, or afternoon, or evening, depending on what part of the world you're from. Welcome to my channel. I am Jamie. If this is your first time here, thanks for joining us. And if you've been here before, welcome back. Normally, when I decide what I'm going to cook today, or on this day, I get up in the morning, I start thinking about it, and I come up with an idea. Well, this morning, I thought, well, why not show the process on how I come up with what I'm going to make? Now, for those that haven't been to my channel before, I am not a chef. I am not a professional cook. I have no professional training. I am just simply someone who likes to experiment with foods, different flavors, different tastes, pairing different foods with different, I don't know, sides, veggies, that kind of stuff, and see what I come up with. So, I started this process a couple years ago where I just opened my refrigerator or my freezer and my cupboards, and I'm like, okay, well, this is what I have. What can I make out of it? A lot of people, especially in today's society, we don't have a lot of money. We can't go out and, spend $50 on a piece of steak or whatever, to make the best foods or sometimes even the healthiest foods that we know that we should be making. But I try to make stuff that I guess the typical American probably already has in their cupboard, or if they don't, something that they could substitute. Like a lot of times if I do a pasta, say I'm using a rotini or something, and then if you don't have rotini, use macaroni or spaghetti or linguine, whatever you have in your cupboards. It's not about the actual recipe, it's about having fun cooking and learning how to experiment with different stuff and trusting your own flavors. Like, some people like certain flavors and some people don't. I don't like hot stuff. If it's hot, if it's spicy, I am not going to eat it. I have ARD though, so of course I couldn't do it anyways. But some people don't like garlic, or some people are on a low sodium diet or a no sodium diet. Some people can't have carbs. So it's just about experimenting on what you like, what you're allowed, what you can eat with different medications, health issues, concerns like that, and what your family will eat. Because sometimes, especially if you have kids and you don't think they're going to eat veggies or something, sometimes if you prepare it a certain way and they don't realize it, they're going to love it. Just don't tell them what it is. So this is all about showing you what my process is, and then you can work with me as I go through this, and we'll see what we come up with on what we're going to make today, okay? So, let's take a look and see what I have in my cupboards, in my fridge, in my freezer, and we'll come up with a plan, okay? And then decide from there what we're going to do. Alright, so I don't know. I got tomatoes, I got eggs, I got butter and milk and fruits and condiments and stuff. Don't know if the fridge is going to be very helpful. Let's see. What about a ground beef? Now, I do buy the big rolls of ground beef. And then, like the 5-pound, and then I separate it into 5 chunks, and I bag it and freeze it, because for me that's the cheapest way to do it. So maybe we'll do something with the ground beef. And then I do use a lot of ground beef because it's cheap. Ground beef and chicken, that's the cheap stuff. Let's see, I got all kinds of pasta noodles. I got rotinis, I got macaronis, I have spaghetti, linguine, lasagna, egg noodles. Okay. Do I have, you know what? I actually have them. I have some potatoes. Okay, I am making a plan. What about... Now, I know one of my episodes I did a pizza meatloaf. So, what about mini meatloaves? That is a completely different recipe. I think I'm going to try that. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to pull out a second pack of these, I think. You'll need a muffin pan for this. Or 2, depending on how much you're going to make, they also freeze very well. So if you want to make extra and freeze them to have them later, it'd be great. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to pull out another pack of this. I'm going to sneak it there in my microwave on the defrost setting. Get that all defrosted and ready to start preparing. And then we will figure out the sides as we go. And then we'll get through this recipe. Okay, so right now, you're going to want a pack or two, or a pound or two, of ground beef. Make sure it's thawed out, not frozen like mine. And then I'll be right back as soon as I get that defrosted. See you in a minute. Okay, so I have my ground beef in the microwave, defrosting, half power. And I was thinking, you know, there's something we can do to spice this up a little bit. Mini meatloaves are great for, especially with kids, or if you want to make them ahead of time and you can freeze them and then pull them out, you know, here and there, whenever, say you've had a busy day and you don't have time to cook. Pull them out, thaw them out, heat them up, throw some gravy on, we're good. Or ketchup or whatever you like on your meatloaf. And then I started thinking, hey, you know, instead of making, basically a mini meatloaf is just whatever your meatloaf recipe is, and then you stuff them in a muffin pan, and you bake them. And so, the meatloaves are the size of a muffin, basically. But I remember, a while back, making a frosted meatloaf. So, this was another meatloaf recipe. One that really had a good flavor to the meatloaf. So, I believe that you did, you made mashed potatoes then, and after the meatloaves were done, after the meatloaf was done, you took mashed potatoes and you spread it on top, and you put it under the broiler and browned the top of it, and then you served it with brown gravy. So that led me to think, okay, so you have this mashed potato, mashed potatoes. You have this meatloaf, you spread the mashed potatoes on top, you broil it, you serve it up, and, you know, with some gravy, and it's yummy. It really is. But what about instead of doing like a traditional meatloaf, like, you know, the log style, what about doing the frosted meatloaf in a mini meatloaf form? So basically combining my mini meatloaves that I would do in a muffin pan with the frosted meatloaf that I had tried one other time, and that's just basically making a meatloaf and putting mashed potatoes on it. So I think that's what we're going to try. So we're going to kind of experiment by combining 2 or 3 different recipes here, and we're going to come up with a mini frosted meatloaf. And then, I don't know, I had a lot of pastas and stuff in the cupboard, so maybe we'll do a pasta side with it, and maybe a veggies, because I'm big on getting your veggies in. I'm not big on eating veggies. But as I get older, I'm trying to be a little healthier, so, you know, try to sneak those veggies in when you can. So let's get started. We're going to go ahead and do mini frosted meatloaves. And fingers crossed that combining a bunch of different recipes actually turn out and that it's actually going to be good. Let's see what happens. We're back. So, I got my meatloaf all defrosted and dumped in a dish there. And I'm doing 2 pounds. So if you're following this recipe and you're only doing 1 pound of ground beef, make sure you cut all these ingredients in half, okay? And if you watched any of my other videos, you know that I am not one to measure. Old school cook, you know, like grandma and your great grandma used to do. You just dump it in there and taste it. If it tastes good, you get going. If it don't taste good, you add more stuff to it. So that's the way I cook. I'm just like, you ever hear of the backyard mechanic? I'm pretty much a backyard cook, I guess. I just wing it and see what I come up with and what I like. So we're going to start with our 2 pounds of ground beef. And then I'm trying to figure out how I want to combine these different meatloaf recipes that I got in my head. I think last time when we did the pizza meatloaf, we just did the basic one with the water, the stuffing, and the Lipton soup mix. So I don't want to do a basic meatloaf. Maybe something with a little bit more of a flavor profile. Ooh, French dressing. French dressing gives a meatloaf a really nice tanginess to it. Great flavor. So maybe we'll try something like that. Let me see what I have here. And we'll figure out how we're going to spruce this meatloaf up, okay? The first step is to start with your ground beef, which I've got in this bowl already. Alright, I think I figured out the recipe that I want to try. So, we got our 2 pounds of ground beef that I already showed you in this bowl. Now, let me see if I can focus the camera. Okay. And then, some salt and pepper. This is a half a cup of breadcrumbs. Now, I am just using the Great Value Italian style breadcrumbs from Walmart. And then, this is the French dressing. Now, this is just a salad dressing, like you'd put on a salad. It's got a little bit of a tanginess to it. Doesn't matter what brand, what style. For 2 pounds of ground beef, we're going to use a half a cup. So if you're doing the 1 pound of ground beef, you're going to just use a quarter of a cup. Same for the breadcrumbs. This is a half a cup. If you're doing 1 pound, you're going to cut that down to a quarter of a cup. I also like onions in my meatloaf. Some people don't. If you don't like onions, don't add them. It's no big deal. But I got about a quarter of a cup of... No. You know what? Half a cup. Half a cup of chopped up onions. Again, if you're doing a 1 pound meatloaf, you're going to want to cut that down to a quarter of a cup. Unless, of course, you're not using them. And then I'm using 2 eggs. And, of course, you want the eggs to help bind that ground beef together so that it all sticks together and forms nicely into a loaf that we are not making because we are doing the mini meatloaves. Okay, and then we're going to do a dash of salt and pepper. I'm going to say about a quarter of a teaspoon of pepper and maybe 1 teaspoon of salt is what I'm going to add. So, let me get all this out of the cleaned up here. Get my hands washed because I'm doing the hair thing. Maybe I'll get a clip and clip my hair back and get washed up and we'll get started. Be right back. Okay, got my hair pulled back, scrubbed up. We're ready to get cooking here. So, we got our 2 pounds of ground beef. Our half a cup of breadcrumbs. These are just a finely crushed Italian breadcrumb. Half a cup of French dressing. This is just a French salad dressing that you'd put on a salad. I got 2 eggs. I got half a cup of chopped onions. Again, if you don't like onions, you can easily admit this isn't going to hurt anything. And then some salt and pepper. So I'm just going to throw this all together here real quick. Now again, that French onion is going to give this meatloaf a really nice tanginess. The flavor makes it really good. Alright, I'm going to add roughly about a teaspoon of salt. If you're on low sodium, you can omit the salt or add less. And then about... let's go with about a quarter of a teaspoon of pepper. Okay, we're going to get this all mixed up. I got this all mixed up, Noelle. Now, you're going to notice this is a very, very moist meatloaf. That's the way we want it. You might be thinking, oh, I didn't add enough breadcrumbs to it. But no, we don't want this to be a really heavy, packed-in meatloaf. We want this to be a really delicious, moist, tangy meatloaf. So, if yours is looking very wet, that's exactly what you want it to look like, okay? We want this wet look. We want to keep this nice and moist. Alright, so, we're going to set this aside. Going to preheat my oven to 350. And then I got myself a couple of muffin tins. So if you're doing the 2 pound ground beef like I am doing, you're going to use 2 of these. And if you're doing a 1 pound, then you're just going to need 1 of these. And all we're going to do is just do a light spray of a cooking spray. I use just a generic canola oil. And make sure when you spray it, you want to make sure you're getting around the sides as well as the bottom. Alright, there's my first one. And my second one. Alright. Those are good to go. that aside. All right, so we're going to just take, basically we're just going to spoon this mixture into these muffin pans. They should be about 3/4 of the way full. What I like to do is to fill them about 3/4 of the way. Get all my muffin tins filled with the ground beef mixture. And then if there's a little bit left in the dish, then I start just topping off the ones that are looking a little bit lower or something. So, that's what I'm going to start with. And my first one is more than 3/4, of course. So, that tells me I took too big of a spoonful. And then, of course, this one's about half, so that's too little of a spoonful. I guess it's a little bit of trial and error. Just have fun with it. Cooking should not be a nightmare. Cooking should be fun. And you know what? It would stink if you made something that was exactly, like, terrible, where nobody wanted to eat it. Not even the dog wanted to eat it. But all you're out is a little bit of money for ingredients, and sometimes that's a lot. But, you know, don't let it stress you. Just have fun. Have fun. Life is too short, and there is too much out there to worry about. There is, especially now with the election time coming up. Oh my goodness. So, don't stress about your cooking. Just have fun. Have fun with it. If you forget to add something, don't worry about it. If yours doesn't turn out as moist as mine, so what? Let's go with it. Let's see what happens, okay? So, I'm going to get these all filled up. And then we'll be right back to do some more. Okay, so I did have to go back and I had to adjust some of these. So 3/4 for all of them was a little bit too much, and I ended up running out before I got my second pan filled. So I cut it down to about 2/3. Now, if you don't understand, you know, fractions, I guess 2/3 is more than half, but less than 3/4. So, wait, is it less than 3/4? You know what? I don't know fractions either, but I know that it's more than half, but it's not filled up the whole way. So, anyhow, so this is about how close they are. You can see about how close they are to the top of my pan. So that's what I ended up with whenever I measured mine out. Okay, so the next step that we're gonna do, I'm gonna just press these down because I want to make sure they're nice and packed, and then that way, when they're cooking, they're not gonna just keep breaking and falling apart. You know, you don't want to serve somebody some meatloaf and then just end up being crumbled, you know, crumbled chunks of ground beef. So we want to make sure that these are nice and packed in as tight as you can. But again, we don't want a heavy, you know, firm meatloaf either. We want this to be nice and moist and you know, a little bit light. So once those are packed in, we're going to put these on the middle oven rack. Now remember, I already preheated my oven to 350. So these are going to go in the middle of the oven rack for about 45 minutes to an hour. And what I'm going to do halfway through, because mine's an older oven, I am going to come out and rotate my pans. But I'm also going to switch them on left to right and right to left as well. I don't know how well my oven actually heats. So if you have an older oven, you might want to come out after about 30 minutes and just rotate your pans and swap them around. And then we'll come back in about 45 minutes and give these a check and see what they're looking like. So let me get these in the oven and we'll get started on the baking. All right. I'll see you in about 45 minutes. I just put those meatloaves, the mini meatloaves, in the oven, and I started wondering, you know, the original recipe for this, you know, I baked it about 45 minutes, maybe an hour, and, but it was when it was in a loaf form, so that's whenever I made, the traditional log kind of meatloaf. So I'm wondering, since these are mini meatloaves and they're in little muffin pans, I wonder if they will cook faster. So I'm actually going to try 30 minutes. So at 15 minutes, I'm going to come back out. I'm going to rotate my pans, get them all switched around, and then do another 15. And I'm going to actually check the first time at 30 minutes and see where we're at. So I guess I'll see you in 30 minutes. All right. So took my hair down. Can't stand it being up, but try to keep my hands away from my face so I'm not washing my hands every 2 seconds. But anyhow, so we got our meatloaf, or mini meatloaves, in the oven, and right now I'm just gonna make up some potatoes to make my mashed potatoes. So I typically use a russet potato. The reason I don't use a red or a white or gold, something like that, is because they're a starchier potato, and I do not like that starchy kind of mashed potatoes. I like a nice, thick, stiff potato. So I'm going to do, I might make a little extra. Maybe we'll do mashed potatoes on the side, since we're already going to have our mini meatloaves frosted with it. It seems to go together, right? So I'm going to do maybe about 6 of these. I'm going to just peel them up, chunk them into about 2-inch pieces, and get them boiled until they're just fork tender. And then I'll be right back. Another thing to remember, unless you have a health concern, is when you're doing potatoes, make sure you put a little bit of salt in the water, because that'll help break up with the starches. Okay, so just about a half a teaspoon, maybe, depending on how many potatoes you're putting in there. So I got the salt, got my water, and then all I am going to do is simply peel the potatoes, get them chopped up, and let me get this one done, and then I'll show you about what size I'm going to make these and put in there. Bear with me for just a minute. No, probably not even a minute. I am also a very picky person, so when I peel my potatoes, I wash them. I always wash them. Sometimes you get these little dirt spots and stuff. Well, no, you can wash them with the skins on. For me, just peel the things, give them a quick rinse, you're good to go. Alright, so these are actually kind of large ones. I'm probably going to slice them lengthwise into about three chunks, like that. And then probably 3 chunks the other way too. So you end up with something like this. And then I'm going to dice them up. It's probably about a 1-inch chunk, I'd say. Add them to my pan. And whenever we frost these mini meatloaves, we're probably only going to use maybe a tablespoon per mini meatloaf. And so the general rule of thumb when you're making mashed potatoes is 1 to 2 potatoes, 1 to 2 large potatoes per person. So when you're doing a side, say you're making for 6 people, you're going to want to make between 6 and 12 potatoes. But since we're using part of them for our frosting, you're going to want to add an extra 1 or 2 potatoes just for the just to use for the frosting, and that of course is going to depend on whether or not you did the 1 pound of ground beef or the 2 pounds of ground beef. Okay, so I'm going to finish chopping these up. I'm actually going to make about 6 potatoes. This is going to be probably about 4 or 5 servings, and then it gives me the little bit of extra that I can use for my frosting. So I'm going to go ahead and finish that up. Get those peeled, get them chopped, get them in the pan, get this all boiled, and just until fork tender. We don't want them too tender because we don't want our potatoes to be too starchy. So let me finish that up and I'll be right back. Right, as it turns out, my russet potatoes were too big. They were jumbos. So I got 4 of the jumbos, and then one of the smallest ones is what I was able to fit in my little pan here. So I got this on high. I'm going to wait until this starts boiling and then get them ready whenever they're just fork tender. And that's when I'll be back and we'll continue. Alright, so we have our potatoes boiling now, getting ready for those. And I think it's just about time that we're going to check on our meatloaf. It's been about 30 minutes. So we want to see what these mini meatloaves look like. I cut the time pretty much in half. than I would normally use for a loaf, because with these being mini ones, I think they're going to cook a lot faster. So let's take a peek and see what they look like, okay? Right, let's see. Oh my gosh, do those look amazing or what? Wow. Okay, I'm liking what I'm seeing. So if you look at that nice golden brownness, and they shrunk away from the sides, so I am going to call these done. So now we learned with this recipe, and being that they're the mini meatloaves, we're only going to do 30 minutes at a 350-degree oven. All right, let's finish up our potatoes here, and then we'll get going. Okay, so I want to show you another little thing that I do, and I don't know if it really matters or not. If any of you know the answer to this, maybe you can leave a comment, because I don't know. So when I am making potatoes, you see this white stuff on the top here, that foamy stuff. Does that matter? Does it matter for the potatoes? Does it add too much starch? Is that the starch boiling out of it? Does anybody know the question to this? Because what I do is I take a cup and I just scoop that stuff out of there. I don't know. I don't know if it matters. This is just, personal preference for me. I just scoop all that white foamy stuff off the top. Doesn't know, don't have a clue what it does. If anyone knows, leave a comment, because I have no clue. Alright, so our potatoes are boiling away here, have been for about 10 minutes or so. They're just about fork tender, so I am ready to drain these and dump them in a pan and get ready to mash them. These drain, dump them in a pan here, and we're going to sprinkle a little bit of salt and pepper in here. About a teaspoon of salt, maybe a quarter teaspoon of pepper in here. Again, go by what your own personal preferences. If you're watching your sodium intake, don't add the salt, or add half the salt. It's all up to you and what you like. So I'm going to put probably about a tablespoon of margarine in. Butter, margarine, whatever you decide to use is fine. And then I use 2% milk. You can use whole milk, 1%, whatever you want. So I'm just going to put in, I'm going to start with about 1/8 of a cup of milk. Alright, so I'm going to start on low, start mixing this up, and then go to medium until it's well blended. And then keep an eye on it. If it looks like it's getting too stiff or too dry, I'll add a little bit more milk. But let's see what we got. The reason I use a big pan like this is so that it doesn't fly everywhere. Right. Now, I have spent most of my adult life not being able to make mashed potatoes. I've only been able to kind of make mashed potatoes in the last couple of years, maybe. Unfortunately, I never knew how to do the ratios between the butter and the milk. And so I always ended up with too much. And if you're an older person like me, you'll probably know what I'm talking about. But back in the day when you used to hang the wallpaper, there was this paste stuff that you put on the back of the wallpaper when you smoothed it out. My mashed potatoes always looked and tasted like that paste. It was horrible. So a couple years ago, I learned that moderation is the key. So when you're starting to make your mashed potatoes, you don't want to put that much milk or that much butter in it. Now, I believe that the butter ratio means the creaminess. So if you want a creamier potato, you want more butter than milk. Not more butter than milk. You want more butter than what I use. And then, you know what? I'm not even sure what I'm talking about. So, but I have been told to add more butter if you want them creamier. So, a tablespoon is typically my start where I start, regardless of how much I am making. And normally I leave it at that, and then I just adjust the milk as I go. So if I have more than the 5 or 6 potatoes that I just made now, I would probably add a little bit extra milk. But you want to add it gradually as you go. That way your potatoes aren't getting too pasty. And because you can always add to it if they're dry. But once you already have it in there, you can't take it back out. So do slow process on the milk. Okay, so now that we have our potatoes done, we are going to frost our mini meatloaves. So I got those pans here, and let me grab a spoon. Basically, the only thing we're going to do there, okay, take about a tablespoon, and all you're going to do is put a dollop on the top, kind of spread it over the top of the meatloaf, the mini meatloaf. Just like so. You just want to make sure that it's covered. Okay? It doesn't have to be a really thick layer. Go by how much potatoes you made. If you want it thicker, you can have it thicker. The idea here is just basically to have that little bit of potato on the top that we're going to brown underneath the broiler. And set the stage now. Personally, if you watched any of my other videos, you know I'm a sucker for appearance, how everything looks. So, for me, where I have something that's kind of a bland look, like a white sauce pasta or a potato or something, I like to add something. It's either a red or a green or something, just to bring out that little bit of pop of color to it. So when I frost these, let me turn this so you can see, I am just going to take some dried parsley flakes. That's it. If you have fresh parsley, this would be great to use too. But all I'm going to do is just sprinkle that right on top of those mashed potatoes. And you see that little pop of color. Doesn't that look prettier than just a plain mashed potato on there? So for contrast, let me do one here. And of course, this is just personal preference. You know, this is just stuff I like to do. And you don't have to do this if you don't have time, if you don't care about being fancy, if your kids are just bawling at you that they want fed and they want fed now, don't worry about it. But just for contrast, so you can see that pop of green on the ones I did, and then the plain ones. And there's nothing wrong with either way that you want to do this. I just like to have that little pop of color right there. So I'm going to finish going ahead and getting these frosted and put that little pop of color with the parsley flakes on there. And then we're going to throw this under the broiler, under a low broiler, for about 5 to 10 minutes, just until the potatoes start to get that little bit of light browning on the top, okay? So I'll see you in a couple minutes. Right, so I got my broiler on. I actually put it on high. So I'm going to do a little trial and error experimenting here. But I'm thinking that high might brown them too fast. But, ow, hot, 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 hot. Use hot pads. Don't do what I do. But I'm thinking maybe just a couple minutes under high might give us a nice golden brown. So let's do a trial and error thing. And you can learn what to do or what not to do in a couple minutes when I pull those out and see what they look like. Be right back. A shot and see what we came up with. Okay, so me trying to rush things on high. You can see how this is browning, but we're not getting a light brown. We're getting a dark brown. This has been about 5 minutes under a high broiler. So I am going to go back to my original suggestion and say put it on a low boil for about 10 minutes. That should give you a nice light brown. You don't want that dark of a brown on these. 10 minutes, low broil, and you should get that nice light brownness on that, okay? Now, in the meantime, I'm just going to heat up some brown gravy. And I think, since I'm a big fan of French-style green beans, I might just throw some of those in, warm them up with a little bit of butter and salt and pepper. And then if you watched my videos before, you know I'm a big fan of stuffing. I love chicken flavored stuffing. Now, really, you can use any type of stuffing you want, if you're even using stuffing. An herb stuffing goes really well with this dish too. I just do chicken because I like the chicken flavored. But of course, we're having ground beef, so chicken doesn't exactly match with the beef. So an herb or cornbread. Cornbread I do not like. I remember when we first moved down south, down to Georgia, my mama worked in the kitchen. And now I was the only northerner that sat at our lunch table. But none of my friends liked cornbread, surprisingly, because, you know, that's usually a staple for down south. But what we would do is everybody would pass their cornbreads, or, you know, their square little chunks of cornbreads out. And we would set them at the end of the table. Then Mama would come by, you know, to say hi. And she'd grab those stacks of cornbreads, take them back to the kitchen, and her and the cooks in there would eat our cornbread. I mean, they came with our meal. We didn't want them, so, you know, they might as well eat them. So, never cared for cornbread. But you can do a cornbread stuffing if you want, an herb stuffing, turkey, whatever you want, pork, whatever. Pork actually might go better with a beef than the chicken would, but it's personal preference. You can just do a straight stuffing. You could do a stuffing ball. Because there's already a lot of carbs, you have the mashed potatoes on top of the mini meatloaves, and we're going to do the mashed potatoes on the side with some gravy on it. You might, if you're watching your carbs, you might want to forego the stuffing then. Or the side of mashed potatoes, take your pick. It depends on what you like. Then I'm going to do the French style green beans on the side. You could do a green bean casserole, peas, corns. Carrots would be a nice, I don't like carrots, but, you know, I'm all about the colors. That orange flavor, that orange color in those carrots would really contrast well with this on a plate and look very amazing. Stewed tomatoes might go well. Just not sure how a stewed tomato might go with a brown gravy. So I'm not sure, like, stomach-wise, how that would mix together. But let's get this plate in and see what we come up with, okay? All right, so all I did was open up some beef gravy. Figured we're having ground beef for meatloaf, so we might as well have beef gravy with it. Threw it in a bowl, microwaved it, warmed it up. Opened up a can of French style green beans. Added some butter, well, margarine, a little bit of salt and pepper. Warmed that up in the microwave. Got my stuffing in the microwave now because, you know, I'm queen of microwave cooking when you're short on time. And I figured you put enough prep into doing the mashed potatoes and the meatloaf that everything else can just be microwaved. But feel free to make everything on the stovetop if you want. You want to make homemade gravy, go for it. If you want to do chicken gravy, turkey gravy, whatever, country style sausage gravy, whatever you want is fine. There are no right and wrong here. This is all about having fun cooking and trying out different flavors with how they blend well together. So, we're going to go ahead and start plating. I need a spoon. Okay. So, let's get one of our meatloaf. Well, maybe. Yeah, they're small. Let's get two. Alright. Got a couple of our meatloaves on there. Got my spoon. Get some mashed potatoes on the side there. Alright, a little bit of green beans over here. And then let's get our stuffing out. Alright, so we got our stuffing out here. We're just fluffing that up a little bit. And I'm going to add that to our plate. I like to use an ice cream scoop whenever I'm doing like a mashed potato or a stuffing, because it makes these perfect little round little balls like that. And doesn't that look pretty? I think it looks amazing. Alright, so then we have our gravy. And we're just going to scoop that right over top of these muffins. Right over top of the potatoes. Of course, if you like gravy on your mashed potatoes, that's completely up to you. Some people just like to put a little bit of butter and salt and pepper on them. And then, of course, if you like gravy on your stuffing, you can also add it to that. And this is what we end up with. Doesn't that look amazing? And then, of course, if you did maybe a carrot or something on the side, you'd have that pop of orange there that would add a really nice color to the palette here. So, I hope you enjoyed this. Make sure you like this video and subscribe to my channel. And I'll see you next time. Thanks. Have a great fun time with cooking. Experiment. Have fun. Do not stress. See you next time.